Hear me out. I think that Calm replacing EU is kind of a no-brainer if we think about it in the bigger picture of things. Furia has had clashes with their internal. Obviously, they've dropped Nerve, they've dropped Allen, and EU and Claw Noob seem the last of the core besides Artisan. Artisan is the IGL. It's probably going to be the last to say, especially since he has Brazilian representation in a Brazilian org. And so, thinking about it, if they're having internal issues and clashes, Calm is a reliable initiator, has IGL experience, and just seems like a glue guy. Like, Calm with Leviathan, with EG, hasn't been like the superstar, initiator player like Arian's Furia is looking for is a reliable initiator player that just glues the team together, can also bring in vibes. Just because if you look at it from a bigger sense, there's two new players coming in with Shy and Basic. They have Artisan, Koala Noob. And so Koala Noob is the hype guy, but it just seems like they need a little bit more experience to be able to make a run in stage 2. And so while it's highly criticized and why it's getting a lot of backlash, it makes sense. EU has probably been one of the top 5 players in Americas overall. And yes, he had a little bit of dip when he came to internationals, and they didn't even make it into an international position in stage 1. But like, you give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, yes, he's been a good performer, but overall, what matters is the team overall. And I feel really bad for EU just because it has been the case where another star player or rising star player has to be kicked out just because it seems like there's a lot of internal things that are going on that we don't know about. You have to feel for the dude. Like, he's only played one game, and it's not a good spot to be in at the end of the year where not a lot of options are available. We got to think about the elephants in the room that Furia hasn't really been talking out loud, but we can see that Artisan has been having a little bit of trouble with his IGLing. Like, he started off really good in kickoff, which led him to go into Masters Santiago, but when it came down to the next stage, that's where the team started to struggle a bit. And as they've been kind of going through constant role clashes where everybody has the ability to flex, they're struggling to find their identity. And I feel like Artisan kind of needs the slack taking off of him and needs a person that has experience. Because we look at Koala Noob and we look at Basic, we look at even Shy, and them have not that much experience, whereas Calm has the experience of being able to take a team to new heights, whether it be the intangibles or just being a reliable role player. And I think, again, that's what Furia is looking for. And it's so hard for us, the fans, to see like, oh, this makes sense. Like, it looks really bad on paper in the sense of, yes, Calm has been out. You let it EG to an 05 stage, or I think a winless stage in kickoff, and then into stage 2, or to the end of stage 1, eventually gets kicked. And so we look at it from that standpoint. We've seen Calm's results as an IGL, and this doesn't make sense. You're losing a guy that's a top 5 player in Americas versus a guy that hasn't really won at all this year, which is crazy to think about. But if we look and we lean on the fact that he's even taken a Leviathan to a top 3 position in champs, at one point, through all this, bigger picture, and even the year before that, they go on a run with EG, and he's like kind of the core blue guy. Again, mentioning that, I just feel like this is like a situation where I've seen in like even like basketball or even football. There's a guy, I'll post the meme right here, where he's like, oh yeah, I'm getting ready for work, I'm ready to hit the facility. Goes in, he's like scanning his key card. Oh man, it's not working. It's not working. And it's like, man, what did I do? And I think it just happens to be a player where he's just a victim of the bigger team, the team has to think in their best interest. While the player, I guess, he can do only so much. He can only feels like, damn, like I should have done this, I should have, maybe done this with this relationship. But at the end of the day, there's so much you can only control. And I feel like you honestly feels like, yeah, yes, he's in a worse position just because it's kind of the last stretch of being able to make it to chance. But I feel like if teams really look into you, I feel like there's a lot of options, which leads to where I think potentially where EU could land on other teams within this shorter amount of time. And the first one I think about is kind of an odd one, and probably one you wouldn't think about, and that's Vitality. I think Vitality has had trouble with one player in particular with consistency issues. And if you really think about it, and it's going to be highly controversial, is Sayonara. I think in the role right now where Vitality are playing, where Yambi is currently playing the duelist along with Durka, they're playing double duelists, and Sayonara is playing more of the initiator role, and he's had consistency issues as being a flex, but he hasn't really had a good performance, like overall, like a Rian's type of performance on the initiator. He's played good, but he hasn't been a star level. Usually we associate, star level flex players for being able to be consistent on multiple roles. While Eeiu is in a flex player, he's arguably a better initiator than Sayonara. And again, cut me some slack, but I think personally, if Eeiu joins this Vitality roster, then they make a bigger leap into being able to be favorites if they want to win now. If you want to look into the future and develop this core, then yes, Sayonara makes sense. But if you're looking to win now, I believe Eeiu is the better option for this team. Again, bear with me. I think 1-for-1 in a short amount of time, yes, new system, really short, time span within stage 2, just because they have to either make top 2 in their group or they have to, be in a good position for play-ins. And so yes, this is a really unlikely scenario, but I think it's honestly the best scenario considering the team and team fit. We need an initiator, reliable initiator, a top 5 player initiator, especially him being that in Americas. To me, it's a lock and key situation. And so that leads to another team, and that is actually C9. And C9 is an interesting story. As we can tell, they made kind of last minute roster moves with Vic. And if we look at the roster, one of the players that's been really lacking as of recently is Jack. And you can make the debate between the two. Obviously, you don't want to get rid of your IGL Zelsis, but if you're looking, again, to make a last minute run and you have some veterancy, I think you can probably lean towards the role of, and this is pretty drastic, this is like a long shot, but if you're willing to switch out Zelsis or either Jack is a 1-for-1. If you're looking for short term, makes sense. Swap Jack for Eeiu, your roster is looking way better, just because I feel like Jack has had the performance, but he does need time to fit. I think he's capable of being a Eeiu type of player, but at the same time, we're thinking short term. Teams are trying to make champs. Teams are trying to perform so that they can keep their franchise and partnership. We got to think about that. Teams are arguably fighting for the next 2 years, just because nothing is guaranteed except for maybe Sentinels, a Fnatic, Paper X. Like those teams are almost pretty much locked and secure their future. And it's highly unlikely they don't make partnership. But a C9, even a G2, 100 Thieves, we're not including this, but the general grasp of teams that have been performing and been consistent, they are also not guaranteed. So with a C9, they're probably the most likely candidate to not make franchising, and so they need to win now. And so yes, their roster moves have been drastic, but at the same time, you gotta throw shit at the wall and hope it sticks. And so I got 2 more teams that I'm thinking about that could fit with Eeiu, and that's Envy. Envy, if we think about it, we could do a 1-for-1 with Rossi, and I love Rossi. I think a lot of his intangibles has kind of gone under the radar. I think he's also come from a different background from being around Pacific, where a lot of the teams are used to the blunt nature of being a teammate. Like, hey, you're telling your teammate for what it is, and that kind of happens a lot in traditional sports. And I feel like that's where Rossi is kind of navigating and has grown up with, and has at least appeared to show to the public. It's like, hey, I'll call you out on this, but like it's all love. Like we're teammates. Like it's how we get better. But for some reason in Valorant, that isn't the case. Just because people in Valorant or players in Valorant most of the time aren't used to team environments. They're growing up playing ranked. They're constantly being validated. Compared to like a LeBron James or some of the most highly athletic people, or even a Shohei Ohtani, is like you're growing up constantly playing in team sports, constantly navigating team dynamics. Whether you're the best player at the time or the worst player at the time, you're constantly navigating friendships and curating relationships, and there's so different levels compared to you playing video games. You playing video games with your friends, you meeting new people, playing ranked with them, then all of a sudden you're getting promoted and playing on tier 2 stages or tier 1 stages. We're only having realistically a couple years of experience, or maybe even less, playing in a team environment. And so throughout this constant feedback loop of being the best player locally, then being the best player in your state, being the best player in the nation, like you're constantly having people hype you up. And so the team dynamic is a lot different compared to most people experience, especially in esports. And so I think Rossi has that mentality, and he kind of sticks with it, and through esports, and it can kind of seem kind of brash, especially when you see teams like a Leviton who are always positive and like joking around, versus maybe a team like T1 where they seem a lot more serious, just because they care about the game. They've grown up in that environment of like, okay, we're going to tell you how it is, and that's how it is at the end of the day. It's even like a coach, do what I say, no matter, if I'm the coach and I'm choosing you as a player, just do what I say, just because I'm the coach. It's always that traditional idea of thinking. And regardless, back to EU. I think EU fits in it and arguably makes this team a lot better. It's a 1-for-1. While Rossi does carry some of the smokes, some of the Viper play, which a lot of the teams need to have at this point. I think in a sense of an initiator, because Rossi does play initiator, it's a 1-for-1. It makes sense, and it arguably brings this MV squad into a top 4 contention if the performance is there. Because on this MV team, you have Rossi, Kesnet, Glyph, Knights, and Demon 1. And arguably, a lot of these players can flex a role. Demon 1 can play smokes, and then also Kesnet can play, Omen. And then on the flip side, Glyph formerly has played Astra, has played smokes as well, and has shown us that he can play the initiator. And so, regardless of the comps, and even Knights can play smokes as well. So if we look at this roster and we insert Rossi for EU, we have Glyph on the smokes, we have Demon 1 on Senti or Chamber, then we have EU on Initiator, we have Knights and Kesnet on Duelist. Makes the most sense. And Knights has the ability to flex, and so does Demon 1, and so does Kesnet. They could both play smokes, or well, I've seen Kesnet play Omen, and then, whatever Senti change you want to do, they're willing to adapt to it. And so Envy is probably, in my book, the most realistic team to pick them up, just because I think it makes the most sense in the short term. And then the last team where EU could land is EG. A common player that I feel like, a lot of forums and, Reddit threads have been picking on is Superman. And while I believe Superman has, highly capability of being, a reliable smokes player and has shown for the pretty most part to be a reliable smokes player, I think if we take a turn and look at the roster, one player that has been highlighted, has been spotlighted, at least recently, is Zerona. So he has the ability to flex. He's playing the Phoenix and playing some of the duelists along with DJ. And so him being able to switch to any role, and then also I guess the only conflict I see in this is Pancakes plays some of the initiator. And so unless they switch Pancakes into another role while also being IGL, maybe even a smokes, which I feel he's highly capable of, just because I've seen some of tier 2, and even some of the Senti role. I know that Pancakes was playing a lot of Cypher in tier 2. And so I think this team has the flexibility to do it. And I think some of these teams just have an odd inkling out. They have an odd person out that could be replaced with a person like EU. And so I think EG could, within the form now, they obviously playing really well. But within the form right now, if they switch out a Superman for a EU, I think for sure they probably make a run to champs, and they feel like more of the favorite. A lot of teams would pick up on the bandwagon of EG, even though they just won a game and they have, seems like a pretty high ceiling with the squad they have now. And so, the last thing I want to iterate is that Calm, yes, has been highly criticized for his inconsistency, but I think within the team that's looking towards a little bit of the intangibles, there's a clash between the ideas of the team, which has been commonly been heard of or rumored about with Furia, and I think they've even addressed in the videos with the recent roster moves. I think it's just a situation where it is a no-brainer, where Calm has the championship experience, has some IGL experience. So even if it's Artisan still staying on the IGL, I think having the ability to have a vocal voice and another glue guy that isn't, the duelist like a Koala Noob, just because, yes, while Koala Noob is the guy that's, always yelling, giving energy, but as a duelist, you're constantly going through ups and downs. You're not always having great games. And so, within the ups and downs, you have another guy that can, stabilize the core. Also, kind of not necessarily mentor the new guys, but, just help them, show them the ropes, a little bit, but, be, a rock on a team. And while EU has been a really good player, I think it's leaning on veterancy in a time where they kind of need it within, the internal struggles that they have. Ultimately, it just comes down to game plan, just because we can have really good players, but if the players don't have a sense of direction, they don't have a sense of identity, they don't have confidence in themselves. And I think this, a team always is going to implode from the inside out. And it seems like Furia are the team that's just trying to save it from that. And, we've all seen teams do crazier things and, make it into, successful positions. Even like one of the last minute changes that I want to talk about briefly is Nongshim, where they brought in RB, a little bit of veterancy talent when he was not necessarily, thought about as a top tier smokes player. Yes, he's a reliable player, but like when he's on Nongshim, he just seems to excel. Like his form seems a lot better than previous, iterations and teams, especially with using CN. And so I think this could be, another lightning in a ball, or maybe something that they can lean towards and just hope it allows them an opportunity to make it to champ. And I feel like that's the goal for a lot of these teams. We just want to make it a chance, and then we'll figure it out there. So yeah, that's been the video. Subscribe, like, and I'll catch you in the next one.